All right. There we go. Forge gang! I am still a hard man! Let's go! I am your host, Forge Warhammer 2679. I am ImperatorOfForge. I am your host. Forge gang! I am still a hard man! Let's go! I bet you're wondering. What is the deal about Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl, and why I'm not game streaming? Well, I kind of suck at gaming now, so that's probably why. I really do need to get back into gaming. I understand and I realize that I do need to get back into gaming. Interdimensional Lizard asks a question about this. Something that has nothing at all to pertain to the discussion of this stream, but this is ankle armor, custom ankle support. I don't use it, and I haven't used it in a couple of years, but in 2021, I had a lot of problems with my feet, and I had to wear ankle supports. Later, I found out that I had gout, and so I had to start taking gout medicine. And so since then, I haven't had any problems like that. So, hopefully that answers your question. I probably need to get rid of that, but it's whatever. And I don't take gout medicine anymore. I've since changed my diet. I've changed my diet since then. Rick Perry says, Hard Forge gang. Ashish Vlog says, Hi, how are you? I am good. I am doing very good, hashish. Are you smoking some hashish right now? You smoking some weed, bro? Anyways, I want to talk about Southern Israelite Drake Alden Shelton and his lies on the Old South and the participation of Catholic immigrants in the Old South. So where should I begin? Where should I start? So the Old South usually pertains only to Delaware and Maryland down to Georgia, but I'm talking about the entire southern states. I'm talking about every state that was in the former Confederacy. And Southern Israelite says that the South was entirely Protestant, that it was a Protestant stronghold, and that is just not true. Charleston, South Carolina had quite a lot of Irish immigrants, almost all the way back to the 1700s. New Orleans in Louisiana has always had a profoundly Catholic majority. New Orleans even has a French quarter because Louisiana was part of Nouveau Francais, or part of New France. It was also under Spanish occupation for a time, and then it was put back under French control. So, actually, the South was more tolerant of Catholic immigrants than the North was. Something that is not usually talked about, but because of the Great Immigration Wave, the majority of Roman Catholic immigrants ended up in northern cities working in factories. but early on, most Catholics lived in Dixie. Most Roman Catholics lived in the former southern states. And for a very long time, the South was actually a lot more tolerant. In fact, Maryland, which was founded by the Gilbert family, was an English Rosicrucian, well, no, an English Catholic Episcopalian family. And the Gilberts were chartered land by the King of England for English and Welsh Roman Catholics to go and settle and found Maryland in the 1630s. And of course, even Florida has always been right across from Cuba, and Florida has had a lot of Cuban and Spanish immigrants. Cuba has also had quite a bit of Roman Catholic immigrants. So, Southern Israelite Drake Alden Shelton is a perniferous liar. He is a pernicious and perfidious liar, and he is a complete con artist. Everything that he says is a complete lie. He is an absolute and perfidious liar who has made up scandalous lies and has made slander against various people. But anyways, where should I begin? I guess I can start with the Italians. I'll start with the Italians since they tend to be the most well-known, I guess. So there were quite a few Italians in Virginia, Maryland, around the time of the American Revolution. And here's a fun fact. One of the signers of the Declaration of Independence was an Italian. His name was Matthew Lucca, I think. His name was Matthew Lucca. He was born in Maryland. His parents were Italian immigrants, although they would not have called themselves Italians because Italy did not exist. From the time of the Byzantine occupation, the Byzantine occupation of Italy, until the Risorgimento, Italy was divided into many different states, principalities, duchies, and so on, and republics. And so he would have dressed himself as coming from the place that his parents were born. I think his parents were from Tuscany. I am not for sure. So he co-signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. And there were quite a few Italians. One of the oldest founding families of the Commonwealth of Virginia is the Taglioni. A musician from the Republic of Venice called Taglioni was invited by the court of Queen Elizabeth I. She invited a Taglioni to be a musician at her court. There was also a lot of Protestant Italian refugees that fled to London. London has always had quite a few Italians and French people from the Middle Ages. In fact, one of the streets in London is called Lombard Street. But anyways, I digress. The Taglionis settled from England in Virginia in the early 1600s. And quite a few of them fought in the Continental Army in the American Revolution. And then there is also quite a few antebellum Italians in Louisiana, particularly in New Orleans. In fact, P.T. Beauregard, the Confederate general who fired on Fort Sumter, his mother was Italian and French, and his father was French and German. So P.T. Beauregard The Confederate general was actually part Italian and was also French. Of course, his surname was French. Quite a few Confederates were Italians. In fact, just before the outbreak of the Civil War, Garibaldi, a general in the Risorgimento, invaded the kingdom of the two Sicilies. And because of that, a bunch of Sicilian generals and Sicilians were forcefully transported to New Orleans or to different ports of the U.S. So there was a lot of Italians and Sicilians that went to New Orleans, and quite a few of them were conscripted into the Confederate Army. In fact, they did not like being called Italians because they fought against Italian unification. They fought for the king of the two Sicilies, and so they had actually fought against the forming kingdom of Italy. But 2,000 or so Italians fought in the Confederate Army, and then about 30,000 fought in the Union Army. Garibaldi was actually offered Giovanni Garibaldi was actually offered a commission by Abraham Lincoln to serve as a general of the Garibaldi Guards. But because Lincoln did not consider slavery to be a central issue in the Civil War, Garibaldi turned it down. But Garibaldi was one of the first people to actually consider the abolition of slavery as one of vital necessity for the winning the war, or winning the Civil War. So about a couple of 1,000 Italians fought for the South, and 30 or 40,000 fought for the North. Most of them would have supported Italian unification, and they were from, most of them generally supported revolution and unification, both in Italy and in the United States. Whereas a lot of Italians that fought for the South generally opposed it, though not always. There were exceptions to the norm. Now, there has been a lot of stuff about Italian discrimination. And during the late 19th and early 20th century, a lot of Italians, particularly Sicilians, immigrated to New Orleans and to other southern cities. And they were highly discriminated against. And sometimes they were even considered people of color, which is just a slander against Sicilians. But there was actually a lynching that took place in 1891 against Italian immigrants and Italian Americans, and 30 Italians were killed. 30 Sicilians were actually killed because of this lynching. So Italians could sometimes be considered white, and Italians were sometimes considered people of color, and I think that the Jim Crow South was wrong in how it treated Italians. I think that the one drop rule and the Jim Crow legislation was far too extreme, and there was absolute discrimination against Italians, which was very wrong and was practically damn right absurd. Now, that being said, I'll go on to the French. Louisiana, Missouri, Mississippi, and Alabama were directly part of New France, Nouveau Francais. New Orleans was founded as a French city. So quite a few French actually did fight in the American Revolution. And for example, in the late 1600s, Calvinist Huguenots fled France. In 1685, Louis XIV revoked the 1598 Edict of Nancy, and he chased out all of the French Huguenots. And so quite a few French Huguenots ended up settling in the 13 colonies. In fact, Paul Revere was French. Paul Revere, the man who basically sent out a message to the Lexington militia about the coming of the British 250 years ago, was French. His family were French Huguenots. So quite not many Catholics lived in the colonies during the American Revolution, but there were some. France, the King of France, did in fact support the American Continental Army. And of course, General Lafayette was one of the principal, foreign correspondents to George Washington. Lafayette was actually one of the foreign correspondents in the Continental Army. So quite a few French did fight in the American Continental Army during the American Revolution. I can't think of many off the top of my head. But some Spaniards and French, New Orleans was under Spanish rule during the time of the Revolution. And there was actually a Spanish general that fought against Florida. The Spanish fought against the British in Florida. And the French actually helped out. So anyways, the French from New Orleans supplied the Americans with guns, with muskets and guns and some equipment. And of course, a French general, Dougras, blockaded the British Navy to prevent it from getting reinforcements in Yorktown. And the Americans and the French fought together at Yorktown to overcome and defeat the English. So I can't really think of too many personalities of the American Revolutionary era, so we'll just move on. Now, of course, New Orleans was French. Half of New Orleans was French, and at the time of the Civil War, P.T. Beauregard was both, he was Italian and French on his mother's side, and French and German on his father's side. And J.P.T. Beauregard was the Confederate general that fired on Fort Sumter. Now, the French did not get involved in the Civil War. However, it is very well known that Napoleon III supported the Confederate cause. And a French contingent was occupying Mexico. So the French were occupying Mexico. Their foreign legion was in Mexico and Syria and Lebanon at the time, and they weren't exactly really too much to really get involved in the Civil War, but quite a few Frenchmen, it turns out, did fight in the Civil War. I can't think of many names, but because Quebec is right across from Maine, I mean, it's just normal that more French Quebecans would have fought in the Union Army. In fact, one of the songs in the Union Army was written by a French Quebecois. So a lot of French Quebecans fought in the Union Army because quite a lot of French Canadians settled in Maine and New Hampshire and New England, and a lot more French fought in the Union Army than they did in the Confederate Army, which is interesting. So there's some exceptions there. Anyways, the Irish are next. Oliver Cromwell enslaved a lot of Irish, and he sent them to Virginia, to the Carolinas and the West Indies. And all throughout the 1600s, there was Irish slaves in Jamaica, Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, and there was a few Irish slaves in the Carolinas and Georgia. So the Irish had already been coming over to a degree into the colonies. There was different waves. There is a smaller Catholic Irish wave that arrived before the Revolution, and a larger Calvinist Ulster Scots wave that settled in the Appalachia backcountry. So, one of the driving forces of the American Revolution was the Presbyterian Ulster Scots, who were very supportive of American independence, and their contributions to the Continental Army, as well as the Catholic Irish, because it was said that almost 20 or 30% of the Continental Army was Irish. And it was the Scots-Irish that won the backcountry. So the Irish contributions to American independence were quite enormous. In fact, St. Patrick's Day was actually celebrated in 1777 as an anti-English move. St. Patrick's Day was first celebrated in the 1770s as a way for the Americans to disavow the king. So that's kind of interesting. But anyways, a lot of Irish fought in the Continental Army. I can't really think of any names. Anyways, moving on to the Civil War. In the 1840s, a lot of Irish immigrated, and a lot of Irish settled in New Orleans and in Charleston, as well as in Florida. And the Irish were very heavily settled. Now, quite a few Irish owned slaves, and that's one of the lies that Southern Israelite says. Southern Israelite will say that the Irish were not Southerners or that the Irish hated the South. That is not true at all. There were lots of Irish in Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, and New Orleans, Louisiana, and even in Houston, Texas. The Irish, when secession came, the Irish in the South generally supported secession. Even though a lot more Irish fought in the Union Army, there were 20,000 Irish that fought in the Confederate Army. In fact, after the Battle of Gettysburg, a lot of Irish were taken prisoner by the Confederates, and they actually joined the Confederate Army. So 20 to 30,000 Irish fought in the Confederate Army. Yes, that's not really big compared to the 200,000 that fought in the Union Army. But still, that was tremendously huge. That was tremendously enormous. So the Irish did fight for the Confederacy. They did not fight for slavery. Very few Irish owned slaves. Some of them did. Colhan, one of the outspoken pro-secessionist advocates, John C. Colhan, was Scotch-Irish. So the Irish were very generally supportive of the Confederacy, at least those that lived in the South. Now, in 1891, an Irishman was the chief of police, and he was allegedly killed by Italians or by Sicilians, and that led to a big lynching of the Italians. I've already mentioned this, but what actually triggered those anti-Italian lynchings was the murder of an Irishman who was a captain or police chief in New Orleans. But anyways, I figured you might find that interesting. So the Irish did fight for American independence, and quite a few Irish who had long stayed in the American South fought for the Confederacy. Now, finally, I will move on to the Germans. And the Germans, when it comes to anything about the Germans, there will always be controversy. There will always be conflict. And it's sad, but that's just how it is. So, Germans had been immigrating to Pennsylvania since 1682, and they founded Germantown, Pennsylvania, about 1682-83. I think these were German Quakers. And of course, the Pennsylvania Dutch are actually Rhineland German. They're Rhineland Germans, the Amish and Mennonites. And quite a few Mennonites gradually settled over Appalachia and over the backcountry. During the American Revolution, Peter Muhlenberg was a well-known Continental Army captain. Now, it is true that the Hessians from Waldeck, Hesse-Darmstadt, and Hesse-Nassau were hired mercenaries by the British. But a lot of Hessians also deserted. A lot of Hessians deserted and actually began to buy land and settle in the United States. But the Hessians had no individual liberties, they had no concept of liberty. Quite a few Hessians fought in the Battle of Long Island and the Battle of New York. But anyways, on the Continental side, Peter Muhlenberg fought in the Continental Army. And the Prussian general von Steuben, Baron von Steuben, actually trained the Continental Army at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania, in western Pennsylvania. And Peter von Steuben, there's allegations that Steuben was a homosexual. There's like some kind of late 20th century historian that said that Peter von Steuben was a homosexual. But regardless, he created the drill book for the United States Army. He drilled the soldiers under Washington and got them trained and better prepared. And a lot of the early American Army, a lot of its uniforms were designed after Prussian and French fashion, military fashion of the day. So the Pennsylvania Dutch, they contributed by far the largest in terms of the German contribution in the American Revolution. And the Germans were already very anti-English, and the anti-English sentiment easily was funneled into their sympathies. But they also had to fight Indians. In addition to having to deal with the British and having to deal with British invasion like General Howe's Philadelphia campaign, they had to fight and deal with Indians. The Irish and the Germans were in the backcountry, and they were constantly having to fight off raids from the Iroquois and the Mohawk Indians. So when it comes to the Civil War, the Germans are going to be the most controversial, because most of the Germans in the southern states were pro-Union. So there were a handful of Germans that did own slaves. The Amish and the Mennonites did not own slaves after the 1780s. After the 1780s, the Amish and the Mennonites refused to own slaves. But a handful of Germans did own slaves. And there was a German-run plantation in central Texas, but it was shut down and dissolved in 1853. The owner was the guy that ran the German Immigration Society, and he actually said that it was very cruel and very brutal. And he voluntarily dissolved it because he thought that it was a horrible, unscrupulous, inhumane, atrocious, and barbarian act to do. But anyways, that being said, August Babel, who was a slave owner in Texas, did fight in the Confederate Army. But there was never any German Confederate higher command. All of the Germans tended to have inferior positions. And it was because there just weren't many Germans in the southern states. There just simply were not really any fucking Germans that actually settled. There were some in New Orleans. The largest contingency of Germans were in New Orleans, and quite a few of them did fight for the Confederacy in New Orleans. However, the vast majority of Germans fought in the Northern Army, and 25% of the entire American Union Army was German, either people born in the German Confederation, Prussia, or who had been born to German families in the United States. And so Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, about South Dakota, Illinois, all of those areas are known as the German Belt. Some places out in the plains were settled by Russian Germans, but that's another story. So the vast majority of Germans were pro-Union and tended to support the Union, but there were about 10,000 Germans that fought for the Confederacy. Now, there was an incident called the Nueces or Nueces Massacre. And this was some Germans in the hill country that had settled and lived in the hill country. They settled there in the 1840s and 1850s. Some of them even settled after the Civil War or immigrated after the Civil War. And these bunch of Confederate guys murdered in cold blood. And it was a massacre. It was done in cold blood, and the murderers deserved justice. They were guided by the Tigerners, but anyways, these German Unionists were murdered in cold blood by the Confederates. And it was a cold-blooded act, and it was a horrible and atrocious action that was done. About a third of Texans were Unionist. And this is something that idiots like Total Janny Moron, Total Janny Death, and Goat Corpse refuse to realize. They refuse to realize! But regardless, there were German Unionists, and they did fight in the Union Army, and they did live in Texas before and after the Civil War. And there were Germans that were murdered and massacred. And this is historical fact that Ghost of Niccolo refuses in his inferior brain to even realize, because he cannot mentally contemplate it. Ghost of Niccolo, Goat Corpse, Euros MC, Mormon Shaggy, and Total Janny Death commit cultural genocide against these people. Now, that being said, yeah, that's pretty much it. When it comes to the Germans, they're always going to have something fucked up about them to say. I can talk about the Irish and the Italians, the French and the English and Scots. And I don't have to walk around this kind of stuff like this. I don't have to walk around controversy when I talk about them. But soon as I talk about the Germans, if I mention about Germans in the American Revolution, it always has to be about the Hessians, and just how un-American and un-Yankee the Hessians were. Or whenever I talk about the Civil War, It's either the cowardly running Dutchman, the fleeing Dutchman, or it's about the damn German Unionists or German abolitionists. There is just never any absence of controversy with that. There is never any absence of controversy when it comes to the Germans. They always have to do something that goes against the curb. Nothing that I can do about that. Attack the message, not the messenger. Anyways, getting back on to what I was talking about. So, Drake Alden Shelton, Southern Israelite, is a liar and a complete deceptionist. Southern Israelite has lied about the Old South, the antebellum and the Jim Crow South. He has lied millions and millions of times because of his dim-witted logical positivism. Southern Israelite even thinks that there are Bible scriptures that fall in with logical positivism. Did you know that the basis of Southern Israelites' philosophy is logical positivism? And all that basically is just a denial of metaphysics, a breakdown of Neoplatonic metaphysics, and really it's just a breakdown of all forms of thinking. But logical positivism, the logical positivist school, is a complete meltdown by scientists and mathematicians against philosophy. And Southern Israelite tries to take the works of Bertrand Russell and this school, and he tries to use it to break down his hatred of biblical metaphysics. But the fact of the matter is that Solomon used philosophy. King Solomon used philosophy. The wisdom in the book of Proverbs is an aspect of Hebrew philosophy. Just as there was Greek philosophy, there was Old Testament Hebrew philosophy, which means that metaphysics existed in the Bible. So, Southern Israelite is an absolute scumbag. He says that the Irish are not white. He says that Italians are not white. He says that Frenchmen are not white. And he says that the Germans are maybe white, but the English are better. That is an absolute lie. An absolute scandalous lie on the part of Drake Alden Shelton, the Malthusian that he is. Drake Alden Shelton is a Fabian and a Malthusian. Everything he says goes around logical positivism and Malthusianism. Nothing about this new Dreyfus affair has ever taken place. Never once, not even one time, has the Dreyfus affair ever happened. And he has talked about, predicted, for the last 10 years that there is going to be a staged anti-Semitic incident. He said that Donald Trump was going to take everyone's guns away. Donald Trump is going to confiscate everybody's guns, take them away. He's going to instill martial law, and there's going to be a Dreyfus affair. And he's tried to say that Elon Musk's Sig Heiling in the House of Congress is the juxtaposition for that happening. But the fact of the matter is that Elon Musk favors the immigration of Indians. Elon Musk actually wants high-skilled tech Indians to come to America and work at Tesla and SpaceX. So, and there's been a backlash by the controlled opposition of the alt-right against this. So once again, where is the Dreyfus affair? When is the Neo-Dreyfus affair happening? So the fact is that the Old South, the former Confederacy, was actually very tolerant of Roman Catholics. In fact, there were more Italians, French, and Irish in the Old South than there were in the cities of the North, at least up until the Mexican-American War, probably even up until the Civil War. New Orleans was a hotbed of Germans, French, and even Italians, and of course Irish. Appalachia was completely settled by Scotch-Irish and Catholic-Irish immigrants. And it was in the Puritan Yankee North, Puritan New England, where the strongest forms of fanaticism took place. The strongest anti-Catholic, anti-Irish, anti-Italian, anti-French, anti-German sentiment was the strongest in New England by English Calvinist Puritan settlers. And that continued all the way to the mid-20th century. So that's something to think about. New England was founded by Roundheads. New England was settled by Roundhead Puritans who killed King Charles I Stuart in 1649. Virginia and the Carolinas was settled by Cavaliers, the people who fought for the king, the people who fought for King Charles Stuart. George Fitzhugh actually mentions this many times, that New England was purely settled at the time by English Episcopalians. Every southern colony was Episcopalian, and it was only the northern colonies that were Quaker and Congregationalist. So Rick Perry in this chat has made a bold claim on his Instagram. Rick Perry and Gene Apologetics have made very bold and assertive lies and claims on their Instagrams. Rick Perry and Gene Apologetics have both lied and claimed that the southern colonies were settled by Puritans, and they have fallen for the same false dichotomy of Southern Israelite. That is a bold assertion, Rick Perry and Gene, and it's scandalous for the both of you to make such twisted, horrible, pure, and very purposefully distorted lies. New England was settled by the Roundheads. The people who supported Oliver Cromwell, the people who supported the new model army and the Roundheads, settled in Massachusetts. They settled in New Hampshire. They settled in Vermont. That is where they settled, Rick Perry and Gene. The Cavaliers, the people who were Episcopalian that fought for the Stuarts, settled in Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and the Carolinas. That is where they settled, Rick Perry and Gene. They did not settle in the North. That is a scandalous, bold lie, a bullshit-infested lie that you have made. And it's scandalous, it is sodomous, and it is horrifically atrocious and terrible of a lie. Many historians have pointed out that Virginia was a Cavalier stronghold, a royalist stronghold. Massachusetts is where the Puritans and the Pilgrims went to. Pilgrim's Rock and all of that. Plymouth's Rock. Okay? So, the Confederates, they got their legacy from the Cavaliers. The Yankees, the Northerners, got their legacy from the Puritans and from Oliver Cromwell. So, I just wanted to say that, first of all, Southern Israelite is wrong about the Old South. Southern Israelite is completely wrong about the Roundheads and the Cavaliers in the English Civil War. The Cavaliers came to the southern states, and they contributed in creating the southern states. Rick Perry and Jeem are also, because they have further elucidated on these lies that the Southern Israelites started, are also both wrong. And they have both lied. They are lying scum. So Jeem and Rick Perry are pushing lies. They are pushing distorted lies and bullshit about the Cavaliers and about the Royalists and about the Puritans. After all, how could you ever think that a Confederate uniform, a dashing Confederate outfit, could have anything to do with the gloomy and just tactless outfit of a Puritan? And on that note, we're done. So, yeah, that was my rant. That was my 46-minute rant that I did. I hope you learned. It's on Jeem's video. It's on one of Jeem's videos. You sent me on your Instagram a picture of a cavalier dressed in fine dashing clothing, and a picture of a Puritan in just all black with a buckle-hipped hat. And then Jeem used it as a thumbnail for one of his uploads. And it is absolutely scandalous. It is scandalous and horrendously terrible, because you're trying to say that the Old South was puritanical, when in fact it was not. The citation is George Fitzhugh, Rick Perry. The citation is George Fitzhugh. But anyways, yeah. I am Brian Dund. So, let's see here. Neverwill says that Rick Perry is so gay, all the homosexuals sent him ribbons. I'm probably the only Catholic who actually endorses all the Forge speaking points. Okay. Ashish Vlog 1 says, what is it? Please sport me, Indian Makers 89. Neverwill says, link to your greatest video in chat if you can. Ghost of Niccolo says, what's going on, Forge Gang? Chauncey Fatsack says, ankle support for the hardback Forge! Third leg. Forge Gang won again. Rick Perry says that Drake has Italian on his matrilineal side. Are you telling the truth, Rick Perry? Forge Gang always wins because it has the prettiest troons. That is quite an assertion to make. MacNur says, was just about to say Lafayette. Lafayette. Chauncey Fatsack says that he is in time out room with unmodded Rick Perry. Rick Perry says, woo! Rick Perry says, I found the loss of my wrench to be an emasculating experience. Well, I don't think that that is probably the most emasculating experience you've had recently. Chauncey Fatsack says, LOL, he cried over a troom on stream, ha ha ha. Who did? MacNur says, Gaybeck. Real Euros hours. I need my candle support. Cankle support. Blacks, dogs, and Irish need not apply for Forge. Let's see here. Hold on a second. Going up. Chauncey says that he is being discriminated against. How so? Chauncey says, Black Irish dog. Keep the IRSI. Keep St. Paddy's out of your mouth. St. Patrick was not Assyrian, Chauncey. Invaded Canada after to get at England. Calhoun. Jew says learn, comma. Rick Perry says based. St. Patrick was not Italian either. Patricles was Greek, is a Greek name too. St. Patrick was kidnapped by Irish raiders from a Roman family in Britain. Let's see here. Chauncey Fatsack says, inbridians. Only the Western Europa has laws against inbreeding. Chauncey Fatsack, read what Caesar said about Germans compared to Gauls. Yeah, I've read about it. Chauncey says the Germans were hard men. Jew says sickening. Chauncey says based. Pussy foot. Let's see here. Rick Perry says, glad I'm not being singled out for the raft. Chauncey says, no, you're not a pseudo-masochist. Rick Perry says, phew. Chauncey says, I am not far right. I've just been right so far. Let's see here. Chauncey, physiognomy, please check. Drake the Snake. Serpent Tongue Sheldon. Mavis says, Woa. Chauncey says Wakanda don't even have ice water. Chauncey says that grape soda is the new food stamp. We are all the right women in chat. Oh, where are all the white women in chat? I can barely make out what that even means. The colonizer divester. Diversity divesting is a currency. Ghost of Niccolo says, sick Rick. Chauncey Fatsack says, Perv Perry. Ghost says, with Jeem, why Jeem, why? Why Jeem Canna, why would you do this? Chauncey says, arrest them. Rick Perry says, what now? Ghost of Niccolo said, caballeros, oda le chivado. Rick Perry says, I knew he'd get around to bullying me eventually. No, I'm not. I'm just calling out your lies. You complain about sexual harassment. All you ever do, Rick Perry, is complain about sexual harassment when you're not even the feminine sex. It's just something that you put on as an act. Let's see here. Niccolo says, bald bullshitters. Chauncey says, bully Rick needs victim points. Exactly, Chauncey. Chauncey says, educate them. Get fact-checked, bozo. Break them like Lichki, the Dayton catamits they are. Broke-back catamites. Wrong again. Citation needed show work. Ghost of Niccolo says they hate it 'cause they ain't it. Ghost says learn. Rick Perry says woo. Chauncey says Brian Dunn. Okay, and then I said the citation is the Cousins Wars. Rick Perry says that Jeem was not talking about the American South. Alright, so the American South was culturally founded by Cavaliers. The American South was founded culturally by Cavaliers. Or Cavaliers. The American North was founded by the Puritans. Of course, it wasn't like, it's not that simple, but just to wrap up a lot of stuff and just put it into one sentence, I'm just going to say that. Let's see here. And Rick Perry, Larna Perry, perennial Larna Perry, nobody is sexually harassing you. Okay? I just don't like when you try to make up lies. Okay? You made a bold assertion and you perpetuated another lie from Southern Israelite. You tried to perpetuate another lie from Southern Israelite. But that's just how you are. That's just the way you are. Let's see here. You have a lot of Instagram posts about me, Larna Perry. Perennial Larna Perry. I want to tell you some lore about Larna Perry. The truth about Larna Perry is that is actually not Rick Perry. The original Rick Perry passed away 5 years ago. And the surgeon, the plastic surgeon took out half of Larna's brain and put it into Rick Perry's skull. And now Rick Perry is Lorick Perry. Lorick Perry has half of Larna's brain and half of Rick's brain. So Rick Perry's left brain hemisphere is half of Larna's brain. So Rick Perry is actually half Larna Perry. That's why he says that he is half female and half male. Because his real name is Perennial Lorick Perry. Perennial Lorick Perry. I'm going to start calling him Perennial Lorick Perry from now on. Half Rick, half Larna. Lorick Perry. So Rick Perry is not his real name. His real name is Lorick Perry, because that is where the lore is at. Let's see here. Slim Cognito says, the only one interested in sexually harassing Lorick is Shaggy. Shag gay. Moron shag gay, buddy. Well, there you go. There you go, buddy. All right, so here's my citation. Cavalier South versus Puritan North. Hypocrisy and identity in the American Civil War. During the American Civil War, Puritan was a contested identity. Fraught with layers of meaning and interpretation, historians have charted out the way Southern intellectuals cast the differences between the North and the South as an outplaying of the old conflict between Cavalier and Puritan. This article highlights the way Southern ministers claimed the Puritan identity for the South and accused the North of hypocrisy for having fallen far from the theological ideals of their Puritan forebears. Furthermore, Southern ministers noted the hypocrisy of Northern Puritans for having escaped religious tyranny only to impose it upon those who did not conform to their form of Christianity. They had thus fallen into the very sin which they had decried. This came from Southern ministers whose attempt to appropriate the memory of Puritanism as liberty-loving revealed their own hypocrisy in fighting for the liberty to maintain a system of racial slavery. I don't understand why I should even be bothering to give a fucking citation for this. You haven't provided any evidence that Jeem or myself have taken that position. You're just falsely attributing it to us, which is the definition of a straw man argument. Okay, buddy. Brain fart on your part. That's just brain fart on your own part, perennial Larna Perry. The thing is that you're lying to yourself trying to be a woman. You're basically a man that is trying to convince himself that he is actually a woman. That you've been living this entire time as a woman. That's basically all that you've been trying to do is lie to yourself that you're a woman. And you did try to say that Southern Israelite said that Roundhead settled in the North. Okay, here is the evidence right here. We have an image of a typical Roundhead in the civil wars of the Three Kingdoms. The typical Dawar, sober parliamentarian Roundhead, dressed in somber black clothes with maybe the odd dolly round the neck has a bit of declaration, and free living royalist, the Cavalier. So much so that the phrase to be Cavalier has entered our language. Here's something interesting. The Cavalier is actually a Spanish word. It comes from caballero. Cavalier is a French word that in turn comes from Spanish from cabarillo. Here's another fun fact that I think Chauncey might like. The song Dixieland was actually written by an Irish-American Yankee in New York. So much so that the phrase, the Catholic Cavalier, the Cavaliers were Episcopalian, High Church Anglican Episcopalians. Although I think a dolly would look rather fetching on the Southern Israelite. He should at least allow himself this much of an indulgence. No, the American and English Civil Wars are connected, Rick Perry. You don't understand. You have to read The Four Folkways Albion Seed. The Four Folkways Albion Seed. Back in the 1600s, the Cavaliers from the West Country settled in Virginia and the Carolinas, and the Roundheads settled in New England. So, again, as you can see right here, he's lying. You can all see very clearly that Larna Perry is lying. Perennial Larna Perry, again, is lying. This is Albion Seed, 4 British Folkways in America. And it says everything that I am saying right now. The Roundheads settled in New England, the Quakers settled in the Middle Colonies, and the High Church Episcopalians settled in Virginia and the Carolinas. Everything I said is completely correct. Larna Perry is a liar. Larna Perry is full of bullshit. Smelt it, bitch. Smelt it. All right, another reference is The Cousins Wars by Kevin Phillips. The Cousins Wars by Kevin Phillips. Here's another citation. So Rick Perry has lied again. Absolutely, Rick Perry and Gene Apologetics have again lied. Right here, he's saying that the Cavaliers were Catholic. Some of the Cavaliers were Roman Catholic. There were a few Old English nobility that remained Catholic after the Reformation. They were known as recusants, and they hid their Catholicism. Some of these English recusants even tried to plot to assassinate Elizabeth I Tudor, and they also tried later to blow up England. So anyways, Rick Perry is a liar, but you know who is a bigger liar than Gene or Rick Perry? You know who is an even bigger liar than Gene Apologetics or even Rick Perry? And that is Drake Alden Shelton, Southern Israelite, who has made up scandalous lies about the Old South and Roman Catholics and their place in the Old South. Southern Israelite has made many horrendous and absolutely atrocious, villainous, atrocious lies about Western civilization. The Irish, the Italians, the French, the Scottish, and the Germans were in the Old South. They lived in the antebellum and in the Jim Crow South. This is Gene, right here. This is another guy that has lied repeatedly about many things as well. What's so funny about this dude is he's Orthodox, but he also follows or is picked up on the logical positivism that Southern Israelite has contorted into his theology. So Jeem has actually taken logical positivism from Southern Israelite, logical positivism, and he has tried to use it to attack metaphysics in orthodoxy. How in the world can you even mentally contrast that? How can you say that that metaphysics in the ecumenical councils of the early church were right, but modern metaphysics are wrong because of the logical positivist model? Okay? You people are not that smart. All right. Total Janny Dev says, unfortunately, you read the wrong books. Would you please give a citation, Total Janny Death? Would you care to please give a citation for that? Rick Perry says that High Church Episcopalians were Church of England, Anglo-Catholics, not Roman Catholic. You are glad that Drake can take the brunt of this brutal assault. By the way, Rick Perry, did you know that the Soviet Union imprisoned homosexuals? You made a claim on another stream, but I think that you might have been misinformed or you didn't know better about how only the right are homophobic. Milo Yiannopoulos and who is that other guy, Nick Fuentes, they're gay and they are very right-wing. The Greek Communist Party does not want homosexuals. Okay? The left-wing Communist Party does not let homosexuals into their party. So you're completely wrong again about that. So you made a claim, Rick Perry, that homosexuals usually prosper on the left wing, but are opposed on the right wing. That's only true in the West, okay? That is only true in Western countries, but outside of the West, the Russian and Greek Communist Party do not want homosexuals in their parties.
Up to 8 years in prison. Interestingly, being homosexual and actually being caught having sex with other men was a criminal activity and could be punished up to 8 years in prison. Interestingly, there's nothing in the criminal code of Soviet Union about sex between women. But if the guy gets caught having sex with the other guy, you can get up to 5 years if it's just two adults. But if there's homosexual sex used in physical force or having sex with underage person or using its weakness or something like that, you can get termed up to 8 years in prison. So it's essentially for being gay, you go to jail, where we had quite a few cases when people would use you as a woman in prison. So how did it all start? Well, it all started from OGPU, which is in 1930s was predecessor of KGB. Comrade Stalin got a letter from the chief of OGPU, Genrikh Yagoda, that he had concerns that the different orgies going on in Moscow and Leningrad, which is called St. Petersburg again these days, and during these orgies, young, healthy youth is getting molested, and also they get recruited as spies. So soldiers and Navy people and young Komsomol members being molested and turned into spies in the same time while having gay sex. So also they started talking that in the newspapers that it's a really capitalistic way of having sex, and it shouldn't have nothing like that going on in Soviet Union. And people started even joking that if you destroy the homosexualism, fascism will disappear. We probably will never.
So there you go. Homosexuals were actually I misspelled Imperator. Homosexuals were actually opposed in left-wing totalitarian states, just like they were dealt with in a very strong way in right-wing totalitarian states. And hope are Citation needed for any claims you falsely attribute to me. Oh, I need a citation. I always need a citation. Why don't you give me a citation? Why don't you give me a citation for what you do, you weirdo? You've always creeped me out, Rick Perry. Oh, are you falling for the liberal imperium, Rick Perry? So you're still entrapped. Is your mind still entrapped in the liberal imperium, Rick Perry? So, Rick Perry, are you still entrapped in the liberal lies? So, you're still falling for the lies of the liberals, Rick Perry? So you're endorsing the same liberal imperium that you accuse me of still being under, or purportedly have alleged that I am still following. You know, it's okay for you to say all this stuff about me, and it's all right for you to make up all these lies about me that you do on your Instagram. But anytime I do the same thing to you, you call it sexual harassment. You say that it's sexual harassment. How would you even know? Let's see here. Damn, Leuna Party's voice sounds like the devil guy from the Powerpuff Girls. Oh, Luna Party's voice sounds like the devil guy from the Powerpuff Girls. Let's see here. The Pink Swastika is a nice book. Total Janny Dev says, Fuentes is funny, at least, unlike the rest of the grifters. Yeah, but he's a gay cat boy. He's gay. He is absolutely gay. Oh, here's a fun fact. I actually was going to point this out on Discord to you guys. But I wanted to show you something. I noticed this yesterday too, and it's very fucked up. So, I mean, unless you're a Bible-believing Christian, you probably won't care. If you're not a Christian, you probably won't care about this. But if you are a Christian, you'll find this interesting about Rick Perry. Look at this. Are you ready? I saw this yesterday, and I was going to do a post on it, but I forgot. But look at this. Can you see that? 666. 666 posts. Okay? Isn't that bizarre? And I mean, if you just look at this guy's posting and stuff, like, look at this. This is shit, dude. And there's the Freemasonic thing I told you about. Look at this. There's his Freemason apron. But look at that. 666. What did you guys think of that? It's 666, buddy. Maybe the real psyops are the friends we made along the way. I know, Ghost of Niccolo, isn't it something? And he's always talking about me on his Instagram. It's creepy. He's always talking about me on his freaking Instagram. It's kind of annoying, too. It's kind of annoying. He always talks about me on his Instagram. This is Lorick Perry. Lorick Perry. And he's got some Islamic stuff on his page, too. Dude, what is up with this? Why do you have Muslim material? Why do you have, like, Muslim Islamic material on your channel? Yeah, what is the deal with this? He's got the cross upside down, by the way. An old article refuting the sympathetic magic model by way of supplanting the pantheistic paradigm required to support it. Marsilio Fencino and Giovanni Pecca della Mariandola, at the advent of the Renaissance Hermetic revival, stated that their brand of praxis was different than the witchcraft of the medieval period. It was as an initiation into an alternative worldview, an atavistic return to the delusions of Hellenistic pantheism, but its practice was still dependent on appealing to the intercession of fallen angels. By other means, the same practice, but obscured by layers of pseudo-intellectual error and, arguably, intentional obfuscation. Levay, following on from Crowley, was drawing from the French decadent period, which saw through this deception, and is ironically far more efficacious than Hermeticism. Seeing that the dynamics of the ritual return to an unvarnished biblical covenant, pact, and jurisprudence imputation, with no superfluous appeals to the chain of being, beholden to arbitrary systems of correspondence and a sympathetic metaphysic. Apostolic authority and the efficacious praxis of liturgical regularity, covenant imputation, and their demonic counterparts are leveraged by the consent free agency provides, has the mechanism. Does this even sound like a Christian? Like, why is a Catholic Christian posting this kind of stuff? Why do you post photos of your half-naked butt in front of the Sistine Chapel? Like, what is the deal with this? Why are you posting pictures of you almost entirely naked in front of the Sistine Chapel? Or what I assume looks like a Sistine Chapel. Like, dude, this just gets weird, man. Dude, this is a rabbit hole that I do not want to go down. Like, this is a rabbit hole that I do not want to go down. Recently, he made a comeback on IP2. And, like, he is all over IP2, and it's just like he dirties it up. Wherever this troon goes, he just... all sorts of disgusting stuff follows. Like, wherever this troon goes, like, chaos and discord follows. And for those of you that are racially motivated, or those of you in the right wing that are racially motivated or racial realists, you know, here's something else to consider about Lorna Perry. Lorna Perry has also gone out with black men. He was trying to lie to me that he only dates straight white men, but he goes out with black people too. Like, Lorick Perry goes out with blacks. And look at that, by the way. You see that right there? That's a Mormon flag. That's actually the Mormon Pioneer flag. He's got that too. I don't know if his handlers, his Freemasonic handlers, were also trying to get him to infiltrate the Mormon church. I don't know. But Rick Perry talks a lot about Mormonism, but this right here in the background is this. This is the Mormon Pioneer flag right here. This is the Mormon Battalion flag, or the flag of the Mormon Battalion. And it's right here in the background. That's in his background with this Freemasonic t-shirt. But yeah, the more that you go down this rabbit hole, the weirder and weirder it gets. I have long since finished my apologetics because I feel I've done what I've seen out to. I created a concise overview of the Catholic, small c apostolic tradition, influenced a few platforms, and debunked some heretics. And I know you have access to and have read my articles, therefore my future volumes will be an antithesis to my previous orations. Juxtaposed has volumes of silence. I am not the man for the job. This is the girl, Mulholland Dr. I've never regarded such things as failure. Merely a removal of responsibility, has Bukowski stated. Failure is freedom. Yeah, half of his posts are just a bunch of selfies. It's just a lot of selfies and stuff, but yeah. This is Lorna Perry. She changed her name when she transitioned from Rick to Lorna Perry. It is now Lorna Perry. Look at this. Not even sainted philanthropist, such as poor Mr. Drummond of different strokes, fame me. Escape Warhammer scurrilous slander. Or scurrilous slander. What does that even mean? And it looks like there's some anonymous guy, or just a guy with an anonymous thumbnail saying rabbit. Love rabbit. The routine sexual harassment experienced when one is both blessed and cursed with beauty. Dude, in 2021, you absolutely attacked me. You got me banned in Reformed Stoics chat. Lorna Perry, you banned me in Reformed Stoics chat, and you made up all sorts of lies and slander about me to Reformed Stoic. You did every single thing in your power to make sure that I and Reformed Stoic would never be friends. You made absolute certain to make sure that that was a friendship that never happened. Because you were so jealous. So absolutely jealous.
It's like Horae Apocalypticae, which is kind of Protestant. And then there's a version of historicism that the Greeks invented in the 1700s, and they have a few different interpretations. So that's how they think. They think Islam is the beast, so it's a different interpretation. I was mentioning both of them.
Okay. Well,
I don't think that Islam is the religion of the Antichrist. I think that it's going to be a future pantheistic religion that will be the religion of Antichrist.
Plato hit the skids hard. Sebastian said, I was told that DS had a bit of a PDF file content also, Comrade Stalin. I remember the show when it came out, but I did not watch it much. Mr. Drummond was not innocent, Rick Perry. That is a lie. Mr. Drummond was not an innocent individual. Goat Corp says, lol, Rick. Don Plato hit.
You're telling people on your Instagram that that is sexual harassment?
I would guarantee you that Rick Perry has dreams of having sex with Drake Shelton, Gene Reformed Stoic, Jay Dyer, myself, and a few other people from IP2. I guarantee you that Rick Perry has dreams of many men just plugging him every night that he's asleep. That's what kind of a sick, twisted individual, demonically possessed, satanic individual that he is.
Oh. I don't know. I really have nothing to say about that. I think you have like some Forge gang derangement syndrome, Rick Perry. You have Warhammer derangement syndrome that you caught from watching Shaggy. So, Mormon Shaggy and Soberman and Francis Day-esque, Rick Perry, and who else? Dark Ninja all have Forge derangement syndrome. Like, all these guys cannot get over me because they all have Forge derangement syndrome. They have Warhammer derangement syndrome. Look at this dude. 666. Like, damn. And right under the 666, he has the cross. Vagrant Reverend Mother of the B'nai Sisterson Sisterhood. Seculum Obscurum. Missionaria Protectiva. De facto male and de jure female. 666. Let's see here. That is literally the mark of the beast. Well, it is an aspect of the mark of the beast. I think this is a good way to go out. A good way to go out on an end note. Let's see here. The number is 666.
Is Jesus coming soon? Well, yes. Let's look at one prophecy here in the book of Revelation. It's in chapter 13, and it's the mark of the beast. Here it says, he, that's talking about the Antichrist, causes all, that means everyone all over the world, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. The fulfillment of this prophecy is only possible with today's technology. If you happen to be around for this, don't take the mark. And put your faith in Jesus Christ today. Tomorrow is guaranteed to nobody. Is Jesus coming soon? Well, yes. Let's look at one prophecy here in the book of Revelation. It's in chapter 13, and it's the mark of the beast. Here
Let's see here. What would be a good way to go out on? Revelations chapter 13. I want to try to find an audiobook on Revelations. Ghost of Niccolo says base juice. That's not a real order in the Catholic Church. It's not, Juice. He's a liar. Rashinda Perry is an absolute liar. Here we go. This is a good way to go out. But yeah, all that Rick Perry needs to do is dye his hair. Rick Perry just needs to dye his hair.
14. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. All that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, And he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is 366.
And on that note, I bid you good day. Forge gang! Don't take the mark of the devil like Rick Perry did.